Welcome back. I'm Shane. This is Relative Time, and today we're going to talk about the Hyper G from the Swiss watch company, which, other than a pretty goofy name, is a really solid watch, and perhaps a great microbrand alternative to IWC. The Hyper G is a follow-up to the fantastic Bunker Field watch SWC put out a couple years ago, and in many ways is done as the same spirit as that watch, where the goal was to create a straightforward, thin, lightweight titanium watch that would be perfect for any situation, as well as one with a crazy amount of AR and Lume for increased usability. Except here, the Hyper G is a pilot's watch, not a field, and the Swiss watch company took things up a notch by utilizing both a soft iron core for increased magnetic protection and upgrading the case to a grade 5 titanium, increasing the strength, durability, and enabling it to have this fantastic finish. I'll talk more about this in a bit, but just check this out. I've never seen polished titanium look like this. In fact, at first glance, you wouldn't even know this is titanium. You'd think it was steel. Now, before we jet off with this one, I do need to let you know that this is a watch that was provided to the channel, and as far as I know, the Swiss watch company isn't asking for it back, hence the promotional tag at the beginning. With that said, let's talk specs. The Hyper G is a 40.5mm wide watch, with a lug-to-lug just shy of 48, making this more or less ideal for mid-sized wrists. For total thickness, we're looking at a very thin 10.5mm, which includes a screwed down closed case back and a flat sapphire with 16 layers of AR coating. And that's right, I said 16 layers, which is honestly a crazy amount, but they went overboard to ensure optimal clarity, and this is something they did with the bunker as well. Water resistance is 100 meters, and that does include a signed screw down crown, as well as coming in at an incredibly lightweight total of 56 grams on its leather strap, which is all thanks to that grade 5 titanium case. Although the Swiss watch company went a step further to include an extra scratch resistant coating on top of that, plus the aforementioned soft iron core for increased magnetic resistance, and all of this is powered by Swiss Sellita SW200. And as a side note, the watch does come with a decent leather strap, but a grade 5 titanium bracelet is coming soon for it. Now, some of you may be looking at this and having a hard time seeing a pilot's watch. It may have a Flieger handset, but it doesn't have an onion-shaped crown or the triangle at the 12. And to me, the train track chapter ring makes it almost look like a field watch. So it's definitely not a Flieger. But once you get a glimpse of some of IWC's pilot's watches, I think it becomes much more apparent what Swiss watch company was trying to do. In which case, I think you could call this an homage, as well as an interesting alternative to some of those. But at the same time, I think this is an homage in a good way, as Swiss watch company did put their own spin on things. With that out of the way, let's start off with the negatives, the bad. And with a Hyper G, I only have two issues. The first is a minor thing, but it is something I have definitely noticed, and that's that the crown can be a little hard to screw in at times, which may be due to its smaller size, but there's also quite a bit of resistance when you try to push it down. Either way, as a result, it doesn't always catch and start to screw down on the first try. Again, it's a minor thing, but the next issue is much more problematic, as it can lead to a case of strap bite. There isn't much clearance here between the spring bars and the case, and worse, one of the edges is a little sharp. With the stock strap, I don't think you'll have any issues. But if you decide to use a strap that's a little thicker, that sharp edge may wind up taking a bite out of your strap. If you remember the Zealous Nova, this isn't quite as bad as that one, but it's still the same basic thing is happening. Now, luckily for me, the strap that got a bite taken out of it was another one Swiss watch company provided. It's a nice hybrid strap that they're talking about selling soon. But as you can see, they might not want to pair it with the Hyper G. So let's move on from what I didn't like here to what I actually do like. And to start off with, the case is particularly impressive. Like I said, this doesn't look like any titanium watch I've seen before. On most titanium cases, it's pretty hard to tell the difference from a brushed and polished section. Whereas this is done beautifully. The sides clearly have a horizontal brushing, while the top of the case is circular. Yet the polish on the beveled edges as well as the bezel comes through clearly, like a mirror, helping to accentuate the case shape as well as really focus your eyes on the dial. I'm not sure if this is because of the grade 5 titanium or if they're just trying a different type of finishing. Either way though, it works. and it winds up creating a watch that's ideal for someone who never really liked the dull gray of regular titanium, but always wanted something this lightweight. The key's design isn't overly complex, but it is beautifully done and effective, which is something you can also say about the dial. Nothing is applied here, everything is painted on. Yet the thick application of white luminous paint against the sunburst green comes through clearly. So everything here, from the Arabic indicators to the train track chaptering to the Flieger hands, are distinct and clearly defined, making it easy to read, set, and just a joy to look at. With the one potential exception to that being the thin stick second hand, which does look good, but it can be harder to pick out from the emerald forest underneath it. The only part of the dial design I'm not fond of is the very tiny date window above the 6. It's minuscule and pretty hard to read in most situations. Yet it does bring some balance to the text and branding on the dial, all keeping it within the midline. Although, once again, we also have both the Swiss Watch Company logo and the brand name. And as I've said before, I think only one of those is sufficient. Another fantastic thing about the Hyper G is the Lume, which really shouldn't be a surprise since it's from the Swiss Watch Company, as they've been constantly applying outrageous amounts of lume since the very beginning. With the Hyper G getting a practically unheard of 22 layers of X1 grade superluminova. But the question is, does that really translate into real-world performance? So let's check it out. Now, there are two things that you need to watch for in this longevity test: the dial and the hands. I'd say the dial has good lume, as it is able to keep up with a Seiko diver, and for a pilot's watch, that's actually pretty great. But considering those 22 layers, I was hoping for a little more oomph here. However, the hands are a whole other story. They are simply amazing. Perhaps even the best handset I've seen. As they not only keep up, they actually outlast the original King of Lume, the Phoebus Great Wall. So as a whole, the Lume will not disappoint, and especially so for a pilot's watch. Although personally, I am left with a little bit of a conundrum on whether or not this should be considered another King of Lume, the fourth King of Lume. I mean, if the dial lasted as long as the hands, it'd be no question. But as it is, I'm not really sure. So that's something I'll have to think about, but let me know your thoughts on this down below. But in the meantime, I want to highlight some of the smaller touches that were put in here to give you a better overall experience. Like the 17 layers of AR. Most brands just use 3 to 5 and then call it a day. And I have to assume at some point you're not really getting much of a rate of return for extra layers. So 17 is definitely overkill, but they did it just to ensure maximum clarity when you're trying to read the watch, as well as the soft iron core for increased magnetic resistance. For me, increased magnetic resistance is always a good thing. It's not something I'm going to base my whole decision on, but it is always nice to have. Just like the extra scratch resistant coating and their decision to use a high-beat Sleeta SW200 rather than say a basic Seiko NH35. In some ways, these are all small things, but they do add up to a nice premium experience. Now, with that said, let's move on to what I just found to be okay here, and this is really more of a nitpicking section. For example, the leather strap Swiss Watch Company decided to go with. Overall, it's a good strap. It's nice leather, nice titanium hardware, and it's not too stiff with a minimal break-in period. Yet, it's also not something overly memorable. And personally, I would have preferred a 20mm strap, not a 22 on a 40.5. Wearability is also just okay. At first, it does feel a little flat, at least on my 7.25 inch wrist. It's not bad, it's just average, or maybe above average in terms of comfort. Although, that said, the thin profile and as lightweight as this thing is, makes it one you can still easily wear all day. And in terms of overall presence, this one does pack a punch. And finally, let's talk about price and value. The Swiss Watch Company is currently listing these at $565 US, which at first glance may seem a tad high for a watch with a simple dial and no bracelet. Heck, this watch's biggest competition is probably their own bunker, and that's listed at $430. But overall, I think the price is rather reasonable, as there are some upgrades here over that bunker, the most prominent of which is going to be the higher grade of titanium. Plus, whether we like it or not, we do have to acknowledge just the general increased price of goods as well as inflation that's happened in the last couple of years. It may not seem like a lot of time, but in some ways it's a totally different world. So it's not exactly the deal of the century, but it's also quite reasonable considering everything you're getting. And it's still a far more affordable option than some other grade 5 titanium watches out there. Simply put, the Hyper G is a great go anywhere and do anything pilot's watch. Ideal for someone that wants a pilot's watch which is streamlined and straightforward. It's thin, lightweight, durable, and has a great look and presence, all while being clear and easy to read, even in the middle of the night. It just happens to be one with an unfortunately goofy name. But I think the strengths here, as well as the fantastic finish, more than make up for that. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. As usual, let me know what you think about the Swiss watch company Hyper G down below. Or if you can think of any other great micro brand that would be an alternative to it. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.